Them. Now, DM Radio, the world's longest running show about data. Each week, host Eric Kavanaugh interviews the brightest minds in the world of information management. Want to be on the show? Send an email to info@dmradio.biz. Now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the longest running show in the world about data. It is called DM Radio. Yours truly here with you once again. Year 17 of DM Radio. It makes me feel kind of old, I have to say, but we're having fun and data never really gets old, does it? It just kind of fades away. No, I'm just kidding. It's an old quote. Folks, we're very happy to have Alla Zaykin with us today and Robert Schoenfeld. Alla is with Athena Solutions, a data integration and data governance consultancy, very specialized organization that helps companies get their data house in order. And Robert Schoenfeld from Qlik, a powerhouse company in the analytics and now integration space. Of course, they bought Talent not too long ago and have integrated it. And we're going to talk today about data fabric. So what is a data fabric? Why does it matter? Why do you need one? And a long story short, data fabric is important because the data landscape is tremendously complex these days, folks. We heard in a presentation just moments ago. Hop onto YouTube to check it out if you want. We'll be posting it there right after the show. Uh, the data fabric is important because if you have 400 data sources, as Robert pointed out in the presentation, you have to have some strategic visibility into all that information. You must have some way of monitoring which data goes where, at what point, who's using it. If you don't have this kind of control plane, then you don't have governance. And governance is going to be crucial for artificial intelligence. If you don't have governance, your AI is going to get all wacky. And just to give you some thoughts on what that might look like, just go into ChatGPT or Gemini and ask it some questions about politics and see what it does. It gets all wonky because there are guardrails in there to prevent you from asking questions about the election. I did that last night, and at first it said, I can't answer that question. Then I asked it again, and it gave me all kind of weird stuff about healthcare and diseases. I was like, okay. This is because there's a policy in place to prevent people from asking Gemini and ChatGPT about politics. That's governance. That's data governance. So in the world of enterprise technology, you want to have governance that basically ensures that only the right people are using the right data for the right purpose. And the beautiful thing is today, with policies, you can actually do that. 10 years ago, data governance was kind of wishful thinking. You could have a document with a set of rules in it, but you'd have to pray that people actually read the document and adhered to the rules. You could control data access at the database level or maybe at the application level to a certain extent, but it's very, very difficult. And so data fabric is this weaving together, quite literally, of technologies, techniques, tools, and processes and policies to be able to responsibly and judiciously use data at scale. And I can tell you, folks, AI will only be as good as the data upon which it is fed. And so you have to be very careful about that. This is why you have so-called hallucinations, because these engines don't have what someone would call an epistemological barrier. They don't know what they don't know, and that's why they make stuff up. So with that, let me bring in Robert Schoenfeld from Qlik. Robert, you mentioned something very significant in that presentation we did before this radio show. 400 sources of data. That's just the average. And I mean, can you imagine even looking at 400 different tables and trying to manage that in your mind? It just can't be done. So tell us a bit about what you folks are doing to enable data governance and data access at scale.
Well, like you mentioned, we've currently got market-leading technologies like Talent that we've just acquired from a Qlik standpoint. So a lot of the best of the both worlds from a cataloging data quality standpoint have been converged and will be continue to be converged within the overall Qlik product stack roadmap. From a governance standpoint, we have both cataloging and data quality capabilities that allow you to monitor, review data, and even profile it, whether at rest or in flight, and be able to take advantage of those assets or take action on those assets almost immediately, and even monitor the data quality over time to, again, make sure you can take action on that data, certify it, socialize it, and share it out with people across your organization, or even collaborate between technical and non-technical audiences from a business rule standpoint to take action on data.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'll bring Alla Zaykin in from Athena Solutions to comment on that. Alla, you kind of hinted at collaboration in your presentation as well. Collaboration is key. And, one of the beautiful things about having a data fabric and a data governance program is that collaboration doesn't have to take place in one meeting every 30 minutes a week and no other time. Collaboration can be real time in the system, making comments about things, sending text messages, sending Slack messages, and the idea is that you want to capture all of that so that people can see and the group can understand what's being done. Do you want to talk about the importance of collaboration for leveraging a data fabric, for building a data fabric, and then for using a data fabric over time? Go ahead, Alla.
Yes, I feel like there are kind of two aspects to this question. One is about resources, and what happens with the lack of collaboration is when a lot of resources are being wasted, and time is the most important resource. And a lot of time of very important people is wasted because people do this thing here and that thing there, and nobody ever talk to each other, compares, and then the problems actually turn up in the reports where the numbers don't match. So I feel like implementing this data fabric and getting organized around data, it removes this kind of a wasteful aspect of not having it. So when the data becomes more of an asset, which means it is documented, it is there, you know where it is coming from, you know where it is going, people start to turn up. And I saw in my own work how the excitement actually grows when you're setting up data governance groups, the data governance organization, for example, and you start discussing data quality issues, and you start discussing the projects that are related to common understanding and building common knowledge around data governance. People get excited, and you don't expect it, but they volunteer for this work, because it has been a pain point for a while, and now they feel like that it is being addressed, and it's in their power to address it.
That's a really good point. And Robert, I'll throw this one over to you. Most people want to be engaged in a process. And a lot of times maybe they're not because they're afraid of looking ignorant, or they're afraid that someone, might get upset if they're asking the wrong question. But when you cast the net wide enough and responsibly enough around a data fabric implementation, around a data governance program, people come to the table, and as Alla said, they get excited about that because they wanted to know certain things. They want to use data. And what I find very interesting is that when you get that ball rolling, when things start taking off, you get some early wins, people really get engaged. And that's when you learn things. That's when you learn really critical definitions of dimensions, of components of the architecture, of aspects of the business. That's when people really get involved. And that's when positive things start to happen. What do you think, Robert?
Absolutely, and I'd even expand on that, being able to find new insights in your data, or even new ways to monetize your data. Like maybe there's new products or market segments that you never thought of that you might be able to take advantage of that. And it's all becoming a data-driven organization rather than trying to cobble together things via spreadsheets or other processes, and then hoping that those outdated insights are good enough to help you continue to be profitable. So you really can expand, and once you start engaging data, you become more collaborative, everyone gets invested, and you really drive those decisions and insights and are able to act on them much, much faster.
Yeah, that's a really good point too about data monetization. And I think, Alla, you kind of hinted at this a little bit. You want to, what is it, crawl, walk, run, right? So first you're crawling, you're making sure that you've got your ducks in a row. Then you walk, you start using more reports, you start doing more analysis. And when you're running, that's when you're actually monetizing data. That's when you've got a very mature environment. Isn't that about right, Alla?
Yeah, and when you're running, is that the impact on the business of AI implementations is tremendous, and you in terms of data monetization, this is where I think it will really grow in leaps and bounds. So, but to get to that point, all this preparation that needs to happen right before that, and this is significant. significant work from like a business perspective and a human perspective, as well as technical perspective. And this is where data fabric implementation does move you forward significantly in this journey.
Yeah, and I'll throw this one back over at you, Alla. I'm just guessing as you move forward in a project, let's say you start with an assessment, you're working with a client, helping them understand. That's a very educational process. Those early days, I'm guessing, are very educational because, first of all, you learn about the different systems, and of course, you learn about the business objectives. And you want to make sure that whatever you're doing aligns with key business objectives, and that just takes thought and consideration and conversation, right? And also, of course, documentation as you're moving forward. But those early days have to be extremely valuable because that's when you're really understanding the topography. You're figuring out how you can use data because that's the key. There, Robert talked about all these different sources of data. There are different ways that you can get to the same results these days. And what you discover as you're building out a data fabric is that there are some very clever ways you can use data you already have, maybe that you weren't using before, if you just weave it into the right part of the architecture. And that can save tremendous amounts of time, effort, and really boost morale. Isn't that about right, Alla?
Yes, I would say so. No, the example was coming to mind where for one client there's a certain data set that has been loaded by a department and needed by another department that didn't know about it. So during the project, this all came to light in a way. And this is a small example. And of course, you're absolutely right that a project of this scale as data fabric implementation, it really needs to tie into the corporate goals. It can't really be localized. Even if it's implemented on a smaller scale, this discussion about the goals and how the goals are going to be achieved is very important.
Yeah, I think that's exactly correct. And Robert, I'm going to throw it over to you as well, because from the Qlik perspective, you folks work with companies and you always have to meet them where they are, right? I think that's one of the critical components to keep in mind is that when you come into a client engagement, you really need to kind of understand where they are now, where they're trying to go, and make a very realistic plan for moving forward. Can you talk about that for a minute, Robert?
Yeah, I would totally agree. And not only build a realistic plan, but you can't approach a project like Alla speaking all at once. You really have to bring it down to a bite-sized approach where maybe you get a quick win with just moving some data without a lot of effort and then putting analytics around it so you can just act on it. And then you can start to review the quality of that data or cross-reference that data with other domains of data within your organization. And then really grow the insights from that standpoint. And once you're building out analytics, you're applying data quality to that, then you can maybe even start looking at some of the machine learning capabilities to look at, not only generative, but predictive to help identify potential issues. Like churn's always a big one with customers. Analyzing your existing customer base or employee retention base and understanding who might likely leave unless you make some tweaks or adjust their whatever data points that you might want to do within the solution. So it's really, you start at the source, you plan out the data sets, but you also want to understand what the outcome you're looking for, the question, and you build on that as your foundation, I think.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So I'll throw this one back over to you. Again, you've set your business objectives. You have meetings on a regular basis. You're building out different component parts and always with the end vision in mind. But along the way, you discover things. You discover new data sources. You discover hiccups in the data. You discover processes. You told that story about when some department needed data that they didn't even know about. And that's what you get when you collaborate and when you talk around what's happening. You said something to me that was very interesting a while ago. I think maybe in the other show that we did, where you said the nice thing about a data catalog, I know we're talking about data fabric today, but is that when you have discussions about it, people pay attention, right? And getting people's attention, I mean, it sounds simple, it sounds obvious, but it's really important. And when they're engaged, that's when they give you quality answers and quality information that can help keep the project on track. Isn't that right?
Yes, absolutely. It can be quite challenging because you have to ask ask questions that were never or were not asked for a while. So, and basically my experience is that when you don't hesitate with your discovery, I think this brings the best results. Because although it is sometimes difficult, it is important on the project to assess where you are. And where you are sometimes is not where you imagine you are. And so this gap actually is very revealing and allows to move forward with much more clarity. Once you overcome this discomfort with asking and answering these difficult questions, this is when it's smooth, and this is when it becomes productive, and everybody can really focus on the end result and what they want to achieve.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're right that there's going to be a little bit of discomfort at first, but once you move past that, that's when things kind of open up. And I think that's why you have to have this plan, and you have to have the objective and be realistic about things. I mean, we all know that projects can suffer from scope creep. We all know that projects can get a bit off track. And we don't want failed projects. I mean, I think that's the key, right? Is when you start this, you want to make sure you stick through it and stick to it and get all the way through. And there's usually some trepidation on the front end. And I've found that usually when you think you're getting there, something happens and you're like, oh no, we have another step to get through. But it just takes focus and commitment, and that's why the engagement is so important. And I'll have you comment on that. We got our first break coming up here in a minute here, but Alla, the key is to be patient, but be diligent and to keep rolling. Isn't that about right, Alla?
I would say so. I think diligence and collaboration. And the other thing that I want to mention, you have to have a good implementation partner with the software that you're implementing. I would say, and we have been lucky to be working with such partners in the past. There's a lot of collaboration with the client and with the vendor as well.
Yeah, and there is some value, I can tell you from the client side. Sometimes I've learned this myself in the business world. I can have a good idea, but I go into a meeting and I know that someone else in the meeting doesn't really like my good ideas. And so what I do is I tell the senior person, hey, here's my idea. Why don't you bring this idea up in the meeting? Because that way it's not me bringing it up. I mean, there are certain political realities that you just have to accept in management and in business. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a realistic view of what's happening in the organization, and you have to be careful about that. But folks, our first break is coming up here on DM Radio. Fantastic conversation we're having with Alla Zaykin of Athena Solutions and Robert Schoenfeld from Qlik. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You are listening to DM Radio.
It's a Chrysler.
Welcome back to DM Radio. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, talking all things data fabric, the fabric of success, a roadmap to AI. We're talking with Alla Zaykin of Athena Solutions and Robert Schoenfeld from Qlik. And Robert, we got a good question from the audience here. I thought I'd throw it over to you. It kind of struck my fancy because I've been in this industry a long time. I've worked with Qlik over, gosh, probably 15 years now or so. And you got some really good functionality. The associative engine is one of my favorite parts about Qlik.
Yes.
But there was a question from an audience member. We could talk about that associative engine in a second. But the question was, when I was using Qlik a few years ago, it was mostly a BI tool with Qlik View and Qlik Sense. When did it change so much? Do you want to talk about that? And there have been a number of significant acquisitions. Go ahead.
So there's a couple of points to this story. One, analytics, you could always ingest data on the analytical standpoint or the BI standpoint from a Qlik View, Qlik Sense on-prem standpoint. What Qlik found during that point is that data integration needs were also continuing to grow, and just ingesting the data wasn't necessarily good enough, and the need to transform the data, to apply data quality, to have lineage, and all that stuff that goes into the data fabric was also required. So over the last few years, Qlik did acquisitions of market-leading technologies, one being like Athena, for example, another being Talon, and took those technologies and embedded them into their cloud environments to really create the best in class from not only analytics, but data integration. And it's kind of funny, you're going to actually hear in the third session from a man named Ryan Welsh, and he actually was one of our recent acquisitions from a Qlik standpoint, a company called Kindy, and they were a leader in the unstructured learning or LLM model standpoint. And they've done some interesting projects, one specifically with the US government called Project Maven, if you want to look it up. It's actually a very interesting read. But they took a lot of that data and a lot of that technology and skill set and brought that into Qlik, and we actually were able to productize that. And that's, I guess, a teaser coming up for that session. So stand by. He's actually a great person to listen to, and some of the products offerings that we have coming up from an AI standpoint are very exciting.
Yeah, and folks, to that point, we do have 2 more webinars in the series, July 15th and then the 29th. And Robert's talking about the 29th. And I've seen Kindy before Qlik bought it, and I was very, very impressed. And this is why we're talking about a roadmap to AI. Get your data house in order. Data Fabric is a fantastic construct for achieving that. Because in large organizations, I'm sure everyone on the call knows this, I lived through the data warehousing era where you had to work to do all this ETL to get all your ETL into the data warehouse. Then, as mentioned, the data lake storyline came along. Let's put it all in the data lake. Let's do schema on read, for example, was one of the big pushes in that era. And I do also remember NoSQL, which referred to like key value stores or other kinds of technologies that did not support SQL, the structured query language, which is, everyone knows, the lingua franca of database technologies. And then what happened after that? Pretty soon you had SQL on Hadoop and bolting on SQL interfaces to the existing applications. What this basically said was SQL's not going away, folks. And I remember when the Hadoop era kind of faltered and a company called Snowflake showed up. And you probably saw earlier in the presentation that Robert had Snowflake as one of the sources, right? So you have all these different sources, and that's the whole point of Data Fabric. And I'll bring you in here in just a second. The idea is that a data fabric is the construct through which you're going to organize your data, get your data house in order, get that strategic view of which data is coming where, going where, the lineage. That's going to help you with data quality. It's going to help you with your audit trails. Really, what you're trying to do, and Alla, I'm a big fan of cliches. There's an old cliche that says kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And it basically just means accomplish multiple things simultaneously. And I think that's what the vision of Data Fabric really should achieve. Is you're achieving data governance, you're improving data quality, you're improving data access, you're improving auditability, you're improving data culture. I mean, you're doing all these things at once, and that's the idea. You're not boiling the ocean. What you're doing is incrementally working through to understand your de facto information architecture and build out the functionality needed to serve all these business needs and also prepare for AI. Is that about right, Alla?
No, Eric, I think that it's absolutely true. It is true. What I was thinking about is that what is the differentiator? If you hit all the birds with 1 stone anyways, and I think that maybe AI capabilities built into the products, into the platforms, currently is the differentiator, because we want to move very fast. We want to stand up our platforms like as soon as possible. You know, the requirements are very aggressive. So, you know, how much work, like in lineage, for example, how much work do you do? How much curation of this lineage do you do? And how much is facilitated by AI and can be done for you based on the metadata that it reads from the system? So I believe that, you know, this is where the difference would come. For me, and I think this is the true differentiator of nowadays, because a lot of what we do, you know, we're thinking, but machines think, algorithms think, and if they can think for us, good, you know, they save us time.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I'm glad you brought up metadata. I'll throw this over to Robert. Metadata, you talked about this in your segment earlier on, being able to create additional metadata and manage existing metadata. Metadata is the glue that holds all these different systems together and allows you to reconcile and leverage multiple sources of information for a particular purpose, right? Well, let's say it's for marketing purposes. You want to pull metadata from a couple different sources and manage that effectively. And this is beyond just some of the earlier metadata registries, for example, or the early days of catalogs. Metadata is a huge part of data fabric and being able to, again, strategically align and then manage information systems, right, Robert?
I would absolutely agree with that. But also, not only is it important to be able to manage metadata, understand the source lineage, so you can go back and troubleshoot or ask questions if they come up from an organizational standpoint. But you also want to socialize that metadata, even profile it, going back to compliance purposes, and understand what might be higher FI data, for example, or what other types of compliance issues might I have in the data, and really be able to profile and understand that, or even look at the metadata itself and see if there's different formatting issues or other things you might want to take action on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we've got a bunch of really good questions coming in from the audience here. And folks, if you want to be part of our live studio audience for the next couple of shows, just hop online to dmradio.biz and or insideanalysis.com. That's where you'll find all the information, or just send me an email, info@dmradio.biz. And Alla, I'm going to throw a hard question at you. We have a good one here. One of the attendees is asking, how do you approach data fabric versus data mesh? Can you talk about data fabric versus data mesh and like maybe what some of the differences are or similarities?
Um,
That's a hard one.
it's
Let me throw it at Robert
they
first.
address they address
Go ahead.
from my perspective, they address a similar type of problem that the companies would have, and that is the providing components to address the data anomalies and the data issues, provide the data management framework around it, that would guide the companies in their projects to better maturity. But Robert, maybe you could answer it better.
Yeah, the way I understand data fabric is more of a metadata-driven architecture where a lot of that management and data governance and everything is centralized. Where on a data mesh, it's more of a decentralized architecture approach where you have more pots in the hand, but depending on resources and everything else, how you want to handle your data movement needs, the data mesh allows you to get more, I would say, roles or audiences involved in that. But both of them have their positives and negatives, but at the highest level, they're just different approaches on how you handle your data sets.
Yeah, that's a good answer. And there's also this concept of data virtualization. Maybe, Robert, I'll throw that back over to you. Data virtualization is not new. We've had data virtualization for probably 15 years now. There are a number of different vendors in that space, and it's some intelligent caching is kind of what it boils down to. It's also, I think, largely metadata driven. But if you think about data fabric, I think it's almost like data virtualization 2.0 is what data fabric really boils down to, because it achieves the same things that data virtualization was trying to do, but it's giving more granular control over how to optimize in certain areas. And that's the automation that we referred to earlier. It's also the provisioning, the access, the caching of data, things of this nature. Would you agree that data fabric is kind of like a next generation of data virtualization? What do you think, Robert?
I would agree with that statement. It's next generation. It also involves viewing data in different ways, asking questions of your data and being able to find new insights, and again, feeding the data sets in a way that's quality driven, not necessarily just loading the data.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. And I'll throw it over to you. I do feel like data fabric represents a maturation of data management. You know, we talked at the top of the hour here, you got 400 different data sources if you're the average enterprise, and trying to manually strategically manage 400 different information systems point to point is just, it's not going to work. You're going to have all kinds of trouble, even if you document things very well. And who likes to do documentation? Nobody likes to do documentation. So you see a lot of these movements towards auto documentation. I'm old enough to remember Warescape coming along and doing this auto documentation. You're seeing that a lot more with Gen AI, for example. But just as a general rule, I think we can look at data fabric as a maturation of basically everything we've learned, from ETL and ELT to data virtualization to strategic caching. All these different tactics that we've learned over the years really should be folded into what is your data fabric strategy or data fabric implementation. What do you think about that, Alla?
Um, I would agree. I would agree with what you're saying. I think that it is a framework also that hits upon all each area where there, historically, we would find problems, or we would find difficulties. And so we talked about implementation and what implementation can bring to the company. I feel like given the broadness of this project, it data fabric really is geared towards a gradual improvement, just like you said, gradual improvement of the state of the data towards a greater maturity, trust, and usability throughout the organization.
You know, what a great word to throw out there. I'm surprised it just came out now. Trust. We've got about a minute and a half left in this segment. Robert, I'm going to throw it over to you. Trust is this just fascinating concept. It's something that must be earned. Obviously, I think most people give it to you out of the blue, like just out of the box, and then you can lose it and it's hard to get back. But trust does need to be earned. And once it's lost, it's very difficult to get back. So I think that should be an overarching concept as we embrace data fabric as a framework, as Alla suggests, and move forward with these implementations. Your whole objective is you are incrementally building and fostering and burnishing trust. What do you think about that?
I would agree, and we actually have capabilities within Qlik that help you actually view or monitor the trust of your data. Town had a market leading solution called the Trust Score. It would look at specific data sets or whole databases, analyze the data and provide different points, validity, other issues on the data, and score it for you. So you could socialize that score out not only at the non-technical user, but to the technical user, collaborate and socialize to make sure that, and then even ultimately certify those data sets. We're also doing something very similar with AI data sets, where as you're feeding those data sets, we can monitor those and provide similar elements or metrics to help you understand what might have quality issues within the data, so you can take action on them before you even get them to the end user, and help create a mechanism to take action and foster data quality and data trust and collaboration across the organization.
Yeah, and I'm really
to add,
go ahead.
I also want to add that using all of the elements of data fabric actually creates this additional quality and raises the score of the data set. So becomes very obvious, which is part of observability.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, and I'm glad you guys mentioned that, because scoring the data, I mean, we've all heard about the golden record, for example. That's a concept that really came out during the master data management era, when that really kind of took off. But scoring the data based upon, as Alla suggested, its feed, the quality of feed going into it. Data observability is very important these days to understand if you're getting all the data you need to be getting now. That's why you see these companies, all these different companies, jumping on the observability bandwagon. Very, very important. But scoring the data, scoring the results, and doing so dynamically, not just someone's opinion, but based upon information in the system. That's how you want to score the value of your data sets. But folks, don't touch that dial. I'll be right back. You're listening to DM Radio. All right, folks, back here on DM Radio, talking all things data fabric. We've got Alla Zaykin of Athena Solutions and Robert Schoenfeld of Qlik. And we had a couple of great questions from our virtual studio audience here about data lakes and data lake house architectures and things of this nature. Some big news in the industry recently. Databricks bought Tabular for $1 billion. Tabular, of course, is the enterprise that sits on top of Apache Iceberg, which is this open table format that everyone is very excited about. But Robert, I'll throw it over to you first. Data warehouses, now data lakes, now data lake house and architecture. Data fabric helps all that stuff, right? I mean, data fabric can really help weave it all together, no pun intended. Talk a little bit about data lake house architectures vis-a-vis data fabric.
Yeah, so data lake house at a high level, the idea was to get raw, structured, unstructured, what have you, data or semi-structured data into one location via a Snowflake or a BigQuery or Redshift or one of those other hyperscalers like Databricks. It was great for storing lots and lots of data at scale fairly inexpensively, but the question then became, now what do we do with all this data? Do we have an organizational standard for it? Do we have a way to take advantage of all this data? Have we stored too much data? Has it become, aka the dreaded word in the industry, the data swamp of the world?
Right.
And or did we store too much data? The data lake house is more of a hybrid approach, and where I think data fabric aligns quite well. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, Eric or Alla, on this. But I think the data lake house approach is taking a hybrid approach where you're storing the raw data, but ultimately you also want to wrap around observability, data quality, all the things that data fabric is good at to really get the data into a pristine format where you can actually start taking advantage of it, feeding it to AI engines, managing it, having lineage, having the cataloging capabilities, identifying potential new insights of the data. And that's where I think data fabric becomes really strong, as one, we can feed the data lake really easily, but what's the next step in that journey? And to me, the lake house is that hybrid approach with data fabric where we can manage the data, wrap business domains around that data, governance, anything else you might need on top of that to help get it in an analytical, insightful format so you can take action on it, feed it to machine learning algorithms, whether it be LLMs or generative AI, or even just predictive AI models to really understand data and get new insights out of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'll throw one curveball at you along with what Robert just mentioned there too. Hybrid cloud, right? We have on-prem environments, we have cloud environments. Data fabric is also valuable in terms of being able to make sense and have some strategic means for managing the data side of a hybrid cloud environment. And I have to think that hybrid cloud is here today. In fact, we joked that we went from talking hybrid cloud to talking multi-cloud after like 2 weeks, because everyone realized it's not just on-prem in one cloud, it's on-prem in multiple clouds. Most companies have Salesforce. Most companies are trying any number of these SaaS applications. Sometimes they're in AWS, sometimes they're in Google Cloud Platform, sometimes they're in Microsoft Azure. And that competition is good. And I love to see the movement of no more egress fees. That was kind of an interesting development. You never know what's going to happen in this world. But data fabric is also extremely valuable for being able to handle hybrid cloud environments. What do you think, Alla?
I feel like it allows to transcend the differences in the data sources and provide the data for analysis as if it is like a unified data asset that is just available for analytics, for AI, and so on and so forth. The data can be available on-prem or in multitude of different clouds, but a tool or a platform like Data Fabric allows this seamless integration. Seamless at the end, but there's a bunch of work that happens before the data really becomes seamless. And like I got like all excited about the data swamps and the data lakes that we talked about just now. And like I actually favor having a data swamp for a while to analyze data quality. The next step, of course, once it's all analyzed and figured out and addressed, then it becomes the data can move to data lake and stay there and be available for all of the analytics and all of that. But this initial step of bringing the data together, was very beneficial in my experience. I just wanted to mention that.
That's a great point. That's a really good point. And you got some brackish data, right? In the brackish water, you got that brackish data. Yeah, that's good stuff. Robert, what do you think about the hybrid reality of life and how data fabric fits in?
That's actually a great approach. A lot of vendors you're kind of bought into their solution. Like some vendors, they want you to use all their solutions and they make data extracting very vendor specific. I think where Qlik, specifically with the talent acquisition, complements each other is we're very platform agnostic, meaning we want to make sure that you can connect to all your data sets, all your SaaS applications, all the various databases, whatever hyperscaler targets you want, any AI connectors, future or current. So you can take all those data sets, provide whether they're hybrid, on-prem, multi-cloud, whatever, and be able to build out assets and make it very agnostic for the user. And all they're doing at that point is consuming data, feeding models, and really trying to drive insights and action on the data.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I'd like to maybe finish off on that, and also this data swamp concept you threw out there, Alla, because there is this whole discovery side, right? As you're building out your data fabric, you want to be first and foremost, understanding what do you have, what's out there, and what can be used, and in what state is it? Like okay, all data is messy. It's going to be very difficult to find perfectly pristine, clean, 100% accurate data. And you don't need to have that level of accuracy, but you do need to have, is it 99%? Is it 98%? There's some percentage where you're confident in what you're doing. But that discovery side is really, really important. I think that was your point, Alla, is that in a data swamp, you can do a lot of discovery. Put your boots on, go out there, be prepared for some hot weather and get a couple mosquito bites maybe. But you are going to find things that you can then use, and that can be very valuable, right? Go ahead, Alla.
Yes, this is the environment where I guess I feel like we are losing some of the aspects of the data, we're losing some of the data elements when we are cleaning and when we are transforming the data for analytics. So, and of course, it has its purpose. I just wanted to bring up this other aspect of having the data in its original form, because that could inform some of the processes that can inform some of the aspects of data culture that can be cleaned up and brought to a different state.
Yeah, that's an excellent point you just made, and this is a great way to close off our show. Robert, I'll throw it over to you. You think about the history of data warehousing and kind of how we got here. We had to strip out all the context of data to get data through thin pipes to slow processors into expensive storage. Well, now, guess what? The pipes are fat, the processors are really fast, and storage is cheap. So all those constraints have changed. And Alla makes a really good point here. You don't have to strip out all the context anymore. You may want to at a certain point in time with a filter or transformation, but you can leave the data as it is with all the richness of its context, such that someone can go back and understand that later. Whereas before, once you strip that context out, it's gone. And then you have to sort of manually put it back in, either in a dashboard or a report or something like that. But that is a fundamental change in how you can store, analyze, and leverage data. What do you think, Robert?
I totally agree with that. In fact, I want to comment a little bit about all the same. A lot of clients or opportunities come to partners like Athena or Qlik because they've already started that data journey, but they've realized that with whatever processes they're doing, it's not enough, and they need help from a data fabric and from an analytical engine and other capabilities to help them really get to that endpoint where they can actually analyze their data. But from your standpoint, we don't necessarily need to refine the data and only keep that abstract layer. We can keep the lineage of the data from the source system, and then stage it into an environment, and then transform it, make it available from an analytical load. We can transform it to a machine learning load, and even document the lineage of that data all the way back to the source. So you can not only understand what the end result is, but go back all the way to the source and understand it from that standpoint. And even to go to one step further from a data quality standpoint, Data fabrics can monitor the issues with the data at any point in that segment, go back to a source system, update the data sets via modes like reverse ETL or other processing modes like that, and really take, again, data quality to the next level across the organization.
Yeah, well, all excellent pieces of advice, folks. Look these folks up online. This is the first part of a three-part series. We do archive all these webinars for later viewing and listening purposes. So, Alla, Zaykin of Athena, thank you so much for your time. Robert Schoenfeld of Qlik, fantastic show today. The roadmap to AI begins with a data fabric. Folks, you've been listening to DM Radio.